The previous basket is under review.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the Basket Under Review podcast. I am your host, Eamonn Brennan of Buzzer at EamonnBrennan.com. Also, Basket Under Review, the best new college basketball website in the planet. We're back again with another episode with our buddy Tate Frazier of The Ringer. He's been podcasting all day, really, probably. But he's been very kind to join us once again to talk about everything going on in the college basketball universe. We're going to talk about the NCAA Tournament again, the expansion again. We're just going to briefly touch on the bracket. We kind of got our feelings out about that last week, so go back and listen to that episode. But the bracket itself came out after the decision was finalized, and it was kind of a bummer. It bummed me out. We'll talk about that. We're going to talk about Kentucky again, as much as I would like to switch it up a little bit. But Mark Post's been doing Q&A videos and responding, frankly, to some pretty tough questions from Kentucky fans in kind of a mildly impressive way. So we'll talk about that, and we're going to talk about the NBA draft lottery. And guys who, based on the lottery, can maybe come back to college basketball, fits and all of that stuff. The actual positions of people in the NBA draft make things very real. It's very abstract when you're just, oh yeah, I'm going to go to the draft because I might be a top 15 pick, but that can change pretty quickly. As we actually get into this process, it goes into overdrive in the combines this week, and measurements are coming out about guys. And so that all affects draft decisions in a world where people can come back to play college basketball and make very good money to do so. So we're going to get into all of that. In the meantime, I need to tell you, please go to basketunderreview.com. Sign up, $10 a month. You support this show. You get access to the Discord where Trilly Donovan is still breaking tons of news on a regular basis at a very high level of accuracy. And you get access to all of the written content, namely this time of year, the portal tracker, which is not just who's going where, but how they fit, what they do, the in-depth analytical case for why teams are getting certain guys, or maybe why it's not a great fit. It's a great read. It's must have this time of year. So go to basketunderreview.com, sign up, support us. Thank you to everyone at the site and for everyone supporting us already. Also go to homefieldapparel.com, the best college sports athletics apparel website on the planet. Homefield, you probably don't need me to tell you about, but they've got great stuff all the time. Any logo from like the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, anywhere along the line that you really wanted to have on a sweatshirt for your favorite team, they've got it. So go to Homefield, tell them we sent you a Basket Under Review podcast, and thank you as ever to Homefield for sponsoring our show. Okay, that's the spiel. Tate, we're in it. What a week. What's going on? How are you?
Yeah, we got official news. We have a new NCAA tournament bracket. So we have a new bubble to kind of figure out and comprehend. We have a new bracket that they put out to the people where we have all the matchups, 12s going against 12s, 11s against 11s, 16s going up against 16s, 15s against 15s. We talked about the makeup last week a little bit and sort of our reaction to it. I mean, we don't have to get too much into the weeds, but I think the fact that it is here, that it is going to happen next season. I've had some people reach out to me that are just casual fans of college basketball, and they're like, okay, so when is this starting? I'm like, it's starting now. This is the new bracket. This is what we're going to deal with. So I think that's probably the biggest piece of news, is that this is real, and this starts next season. I think a lot of people thought there might be like a grace period, right? We see some of this stuff have a little bit of a slower runway before it comes into reality, but this is happening, and we have a new bracket that we have to look at now.
Yeah, and it sucks. It's really bad. I will say, people can go back and listen to us last week. I oppose tournament expansion on the merits, but am kind of like, as I said last week, kind of worn down. Like, I can't get that mad about it. I just, you know what I mean? I'm at the stage in my life where it's just like, I can't ratchet up the passion for this. And maybe that says more about me than the structures of college sports. But when the decision was made final, and it was unanimous, by the way, there's not a single person in the committee. What is this, Soviet era Stalin? Everybody's got to vote the same way. You all can't. There's not one dissenting vote that you can let somebody have. It's unanimous. And you actually see the bracket, and it kind of, that seeing it visibly, And I feel like the NCAA, when they tweeted it out, you know, it's the classic 64 team format, except it highlights every matchup where, and maybe Corey can throw this up for the video viewers, but it's not a big deal. If not, you can find it very easily online. Like all the matchups are up and down the bracket now. And it's just like, I feel like they tweeted it out being like, see, it's not that big of a deal. You still have the 64 team bracket. And I feel like that's probably true for the vast majority of people who will watch the NCAA tournament starting on Thursday, right? This is the big divide. Is like, there's a huge number of people who are just like, oh, hey, the tournament's on. Cool. I'll watch it today. But for those of us who actually care about this sport and care about it enough to like really dial into who's going to get in, who's going to get out, whatever, you've got these extra at-large games up on the top left that just are like, ugh, like, I know this is just going to be so gross. Like, there's going to be a 500 team that gets in, like straight up, you know, like Auburn last year was 17-16, didn't get in. And that was like the big scandal of, you know, that was the thing we talked
Bruce
about.
Pearl's nightmare. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and so now that team would get in easily. They're the, you know, they'd be right in there. And it's just, you know, the actual tangible ratification of it and the visible, maybe I'm a visual learner, I don't know, but seeing the bracket with all these matchups kind of stuck into it, it just, I don't know, man. It relative to last week's conversation, it bummed me out more than I thought it would.
Yeah, it does feel like a contract where they have like an addendum at the bottom where there's like a force majeure clause that you don't see and it's written in really small lettering. And I feel like that's what they tried to do with the bracket where they're like, see, it's the exact same. Just don't look at the top because we've, you know, made it a little bit smaller. And there are some matchups that have 24 teams involved, 52 teams will be in. But then, yeah, we have some games to play on Tuesday and Wednesday. But don't worry about those. It'll be the same. Thursday and Friday will be fine. It kind of reminds me like, I don't know, like, you know, Hardee's for us, but like Carl's Jr. out here. But like they had the thick burgers, you know, once upon a time. And they first came out, everyone's like, yeah, these are great. You know, these are Angus beef, perfect. And they kept like throwing more and more on the burger. And you're just like, this is too much. Like, I can't eat this. Like, this is like not a palatable situation for anybody. And I feel like that's the NCAA tournament. And Tom Izzo, I thought he, you know, Norlander had, you know, he compiled a lot of coaches and who had thoughts on the tournament. And I thought one of my favorite quotes from that was that the NCAA tournament is supposed to be a privilege, not a right. And it does feel like we're trending in a direction where people that are playing at this level do feel like, hey, if I'm in a power conference, this is a right that I should be able to play in the NCAA tournament. And it's not a privilege. I didn't earn the privilege to be able to play in the NCAA tournament. And also in the quote from Izzo, which again, there were two things that I really pointed to that stuck out to me. One is he said this, he said coaches weren't asked at all. And I do think that's like a big problem that I've always had. Not to say that coaches should have the final say on anything, but I do feel like they should be at the table. And Coach K has said that over the years. I think he's correct about that. I think we've had plenty of coaches, even dating back to like, you know, Al McGuire days where they're just like, why are we not involved in these processes at all? We're the ones that are actually involved in the game. But for whatever reason, the coaches had no say in this. And then he got to the end of his quote and he said, look, it's just like NIL. You know, you can have 10 million, but you won't have enough. You can have 20 million. It's not enough. If we go to 76, they're eventually going to get to 96 and it's never going to be enough. And I think that's the real existential threat to all of this. It's like, yes, we got to this number. Yes, it's expansion for now. And again, it's expansion for now because you and I talked about it last week. It's like, this is not going to be a process that ends because there's still going to be teams that are like, hey, we didn't make the field here. We should have been in the field. Like, there are going to be people that are aggrieved. There's going to be programs that are aggrieved. And then there's going to be a push to expand to 96 or whatever the next number is. And eventually we're just going to have a tournament with everybody who's the D1 team that's playing in the NCAA tournament. And it's just going to feel like the Onion article that I referenced last week where it's 100 and some teams or 300 teams, whatever it is, that are all competing for the national championship. And that is not the integrity or the reality of what we want for the NCAA tournament. And it lends itself to just a tough spot because we're messing with something that does have so much magic behind it, and it has given us so many great tournaments. And obviously this started in 1985 when we got to 64 teams. I think that was the right move because you go back in time and you look at some of these teams from like the early 80s and late 70s, and you're like, wow, they didn't make the tournament. And, they're like, well, they didn't win their conference. They weren't able to get in. And it's like, okay, well, they should have been able to compete for the national championship. That's fair. But when you get to a point where it's like a 16 and 18 team is arguing that they should have a chance to win the national championship, I think that's when we're going to lose the plot. And I think not having coaches involved, the ever expansion cloud that continues to kind of, hang over this whole tournament conversation is what we're really worried about. And I do feel like we're not done yet. Even though this is a new thing for now, I think, we're probably going to get to, in 5 years, the conversation comes back around and more money comes into play. And we're going to be having the same thing again, where you and I can get all the way riled up because we have more things in our life that, take our focus. But again, it's just, it's frustrating, I think, is probably the best word. I don't know if it's sad. I don't know if I'm mad. I'm just frustrated.
Yeah, I think I want to shout out Dan Wolken at Yahoo Sports, who wrote a great column about what's really frustrating about this is not the actual, even though for me it kind of is the actual going to 7. Like, I don't think the tournament needs it. I think it's silly and it sucks. The really frustrating thing, if you take a deep breath and step back from it and understand what's going on here, and we talked about it on last week's show, is that, and this is the thrust of Dan's column, is that you're essentially doing a thing that nobody else but Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti want to happen. Mm-hmm. The two most powerful people in college sports, right? The commissioner of the SEC and the commissioner of the Big Ten. These are the only two people who want this to happen. And they are essentially, and have been for years, with, the collaboration of the much less powerful ACC commissioner, Jim Phillips, and the Big 12 commissioner, Brett Yormark, have been threatening to do a apocalyptic, we'll just do our own thing, screw you. Like, we can do whatever we want, so do what we say.
Which the Crown is kind of a proof of concept, right? That's a little bit of like, hey, here's a tournament over here, and we're already tinkering with something right here, right?
Yeah, and it happens in November, and so it's not like, but it is a threat, and I don't know that it has gone super well logistically, but it continues to exist, and it's going to expand this coming fall, and that's the thrust of Dan's column, which I think is really smart, which is just like, whatever you think, even if you're like, hey, I like expansion, cool, great, like whatever, who cares? Or it doesn't bother me either way. I'm not going to watch on Tuesday and Wednesday. Show me the bracket Thursday morning. I'll pick it and I'm off and running. Like, fine. But the big problem with it, which is also the big problem with college football right now, is you're letting these two guys essentially control what happens in college sports. Mm-hmm. And there are much bigger problems if you identify them as problems in college sports, right? Like the number of teams in the NCAA tournament is not an urgent matter that had to get done this summer, that had to be passed unanimously through committee, that just had to get rubber stamped, right? Like, this is not the thing that people should be focusing their energy on. And there's not even that much money coming. Like,
as they said,
is, yeah, they're happy to admit it's like another $131 million. It would be funny if it was $131. They just give all of that to they just hand Greg Sankey, like,
get you a nice bottle of wine, Greg. Yeah.
Yes, there you go, Greg. But no, $131 million is what Matt Norlander reported, and that's like not a ton of money in 2026 in the TV sports rights situation. Like, you get to put some more ads on and sell some more beer and gambling sponsorships or whatever. But like, that's not like a huge deal. They're just doing it because they have been made to feel like they have to. And the NCAA is willing to, for its own continued existence, because this is what the NCAA does, is administer the tournament, is throw their body in the way of the whole thing. And it's just a bummer. It sucks. And that, I think, is the main thing to get mad about. If you're mad about it, I am annoyed about it, I would say I'm highly annoyed about it, especially after seeing the bracket. But I'm mostly annoyed that the same guys that killed the Pac-12 and that have apparently very little regard for what the organic health of college sports means and what actually that entails beyond just, can we put this team in this market? Can we, how do we juice the TV ratings this way and that way and that? Like, there's more to this enterprise than that, and not recognizing that is soulless and silly and probably going to backfire like in 10, 20 years. You know what I mean? Like the organic health of the sport is more important than these little marginal gains. And I don't know that the two people who are doing this stuff, as Dan writes, really recognize that.
Yeah, it's for profit margins. And they just did I think it was the Atlantic just did a profile on Adam Silver, and they were sort of pointing the same thing for the NBA. It was like, all they really care about is the bottom line of the money. And as long as there's more money coming in, like they'll have these conversations about fairness and, hey, we want to fix tampering and all that sort of stuff. But that's sort of a way to appease the pushback from the people that love the sport. And the same with college sports. It's like, there's people, it's not just the teams. Like, these aren't just teams in your town that you care about. Like, these are your universities that you attended. These are your alma maters. This is where your parents went. This is where you went. There's so much connective tissue that like, this means a lot to people. And it does feel like a lot of times these decisions are made by people that really just don't care about any of that sort of stuff. Sure, they'll say the lines and they'll placate you at some level, but in reality, it's like, this is just purely for profit. And I think the more that it feels that way, the ickier it feels for everybody. And this just feels like a very icky situation. It also just feels like a slippery slope in all, because if they're able to get what they want this easily, this quickly, it's like, when does that rope in? You know what I mean? Like, when can the NCAA actually get a backbone and stand up and say, hey, you don't get to dictate our terms and you don't get to tell us what to do? But really, they don't have that, because they lose every court case they go towards, and they really just want to keep this money making machine. And as long as they can appease these power conferences, they're like, okay, we saved the day today. There's going to be another problem tomorrow, but hey, at least we're good today. But like, the problems just grow and grow and grow, and they keep trying to stuff them in the box and close up the box. But like, Pandora's box is open, and it's frustrating, because like you said, when do you lose your soul? And I think it's just in the direction of like a soulless enterprise. And the one thing about college sports, and the reason we love it so much, is because it does have the soul of the people and the people involved and the people that are connected to all these programs and all these tournament runs. I mean, all these teams you love so much, and they mean something to you. They're mile markers of your life. And it just feels like we're going in a direction that could be pretty dire. It feels like we're just a corporate entity at this point, and that's not what college sports is supposed to be.
Right. And like, look, the Big Ten and the SEC are not publicly traded companies. Mm-hmm. Like, they don't have to take the most maximally profitable decision at any point, because they answer to thousands or hundreds or millions of shareholders.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, Dan has a really good paragraph, and he said, when it comes to fixing a real problem like the rise of $20 million college basketball rosters, while only a handful of programs even bring in $20 million in revenue, they are suddenly helpless and out of answers, reduced to groveling at the feet of politicians to rescue their industry from its own lack of courage and discipline. If college presidents had any wits about them when it comes to athletics, here's what they would do. Sit Petiti, Sankey, and other power conference commissioners in a room and deliver an ultimatum to get college sports fixed over the next year, or they will all be replaced. End of story. And that gets at a really important thing here, which is that in theory, the commissioners are supposed to work for the schools.
Right.
The same way that the NCAA works for, and the NCAA, to its credit, over multiple stages of leadership, and I think Charlie Baker is a bit of a different breed, but fundamentally is still kind of doing the same job. The whole point is, this is a membership, and the college presidents are a huge part of it, right? And especially the Big Ten and the SEC, that has, and I'm fighting a battle from probably 10, 15, 20 years ago at this point. But at what point do you, as a college president who is well paid and among the highest paid earners in your state, or at least public earners in your state, right, sit there and go, hold on a second. Like, what are we doing? You know what I mean? Like, what's the point here? How do we, I sound like the SNL guy doing Tucker Carlson. Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
What are we doing? But like like at what point is a college president who's making probably like $1 million a year being the president of Ole Miss or whatever, do you not step up and be like, hey man, like, can we get some people to like tell everybody to chill out because we have way bigger problems than this? And again, okay, 68 teams, 76 teams. It's solving a problem that doesn't exist except for a couple of people, a handful of people at max. And that's the thing that is extremely disappointing about it. And the thing that really bummed me out writing through and talking about, like, for my newsletter, even a couple years ago, I launched it and then it was like, oh, the Pac-12's collapsing and it was gone. And then like Bill Walton died and I wrote about that. And it was just like, this is the stuff that actually matters about college sports.
Mm-hmm.
Like UCLA playing, at Oregon State on a random Thursday night. That's actually kind of important. That stuff matters. And that's a random thing that like probably, a ton of people didn't watch on TV, but that stuff has decades of history to it and it matters. It's important. And it's kind of gone now. And if it continues down this path and tournament expansion is one more step on this path, then we are going to, and college football expansion is the same way. It's like, do you just want to be a worse NFL?
Yeah, right.
Or do you want to be college sports? Like, you know what I mean? Do you want to have all this stuff where, okay, yeah, we've got the pageantry, but fundamentally we're just doing the NFL thing. And there's like 30 teams. And it's just like, no, like this is not what's cool about this. That's not the point. That's not why we're here.
And also, like, just from an NBA perspective, like they created an in-season tournament to try to match the what is happening in college, the magic of the college basketball tournament situation,
yes.
Right? I mean, like they're trying to copy you while you try to copy them. You know what I mean? It's like, what are you guys doing, and why don't you understand what makes you unique and different? And I think that's very fair. And you mentioned it, like I have a connection to Wazoo, and like just seeing like the Apple Cup be in kind of free fall, like as we don't know what's going to happen every year. It's like a year-to-year contract. Like this is an in-state rivalry that has so much history, and now we don't even know if it's guaranteed to happen every single year. And eventually it probably won't, because Washington's like, why are we going to set ourselves up to go against a team that could upset us, and we're going to hurt our chances to be in the NCAA tournament or to make the college football playoff or whatever it is. And you're like, this is just so far from the world I want to live in when it comes to college sports, because those rivalries and those regional ties really do matter. I mean, Oregon State and Washington State get absolutely screwed by Oregon and Washington, like Arizona and Arizona State, at least they kind of saddled up together and say, hey, this is good for both of us and good for the state. Let's stay together and we'll make the move together to the Big 12. But like the teams that get left behind, it just makes it even worse. And, to use your original Tucker, that's the rule. That's the thing.
That's the goal now.
Yeah, that's the goal now. That's what we're trying to get to.
That's the rule.
And it's frustrating for everybody involved. And I just feel like there just has to be, you mentioned Bill Walton, I mean, Dickie V, like there's so many people, Bill Raftery, there's so many people that like understand that magic. And I just don't feel like we use the resources of the people that get it in these rooms. I feel like we have a lot of people that have worked in different businesses and been in different places that don't really understand what they're even operating at times. And that's not to disrespect the intellect, because there's a lot of smart people that are involved. And it also goes back to what you were saying before. Like there's so many more problems in college sports that need to be solved. And they act like, hey, our hands are tied. We can't do this. But then when they want something to be done, it's done within 3 months, And you're like, you can't have it both ways. You can't tell me that this is impossible and there's too many, cooks in the kitchen to make it work. And then when you want something, it's done like that. It's like those two things can't exist in reality, or somebody is just giving us a farce. And we want to live in a world where we at least get some semblance of truth. And it doesn't feel like we live in that right now.
No, we don't. What's the deal? What's going on?
Sinners.
What are we doing? What are we doing? That cracks me up.
It's good. It's
good. It's just tournament expansion. kind of sucks, and I don't think it sucks 100%, but it's not great, and I don't love it. And if it were done from what I could read as an altruistic perspective, Calipari, God bless him, in that Norlander story was like, well, if we give half of them to mid-major AQs, then I'm cool with it. You know what I mean? Like he like of all people that you would think would be the big showy, like high major conference guy, Cal is like, oh, well, I don't like it at all unless we do it in such a way that will include regular season champions of mid-major conferences.
Also, if you win your conference, you should not be playing in a game to get in the tournament. That's the other frustrating part, where it's like these teams that are going to win their conference tournaments are now going to have to play another game to then say and solidify they got in the NCAA tournament as 16 seeds, 15 seeds, whatever it may be. And that's also frustrating because that's such a feather in your cap to be like, hey, I won my, the NEC, and now I'm playing in the NCAA tournament. And now, hey, no, you're not. You have to go to Wichita or Dayton or wherever and play your way in yet again. And
I mean, those teams. The problem is, at least this is what the argument is that those teams like that because they play an equal, in theory, level team. You play another 16 seed, and if you win, you get a win share.
Yeah, you get
money. So for those
right.
conferences, it's like a huge deal. And they don't have to beat a number 1 seed; they just have to beat a 16 seed. Yeah. So I get that, but it's also, it feels like a bummer to people watching of why does, if you're going to get people invested in the first, I was about to say the first 4, the first whatever it is going to be now, and you really want them in on the bargain, that would help make the sell a little better. Is if you could just don't shutter off these guys, give them a win share just for being in the tournament for guys, whatever you got to do, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But make it all of the mediocre at-large teams that have to play their way into the tournament. That would probably make people a lot happier. And this version of expansion is essentially just an expansion on what currently exists. And it's agnostic to the mid-majors. It doesn't have any sort of, I don't know what the right way to phrase it is. Affirmative. I'm not going to say affirmative action. Affirmative, steps to make those guys get in the tournament more easily. It's just we don't pay attention to that. The seeds of the seeds, whatever. Fine.
We don't even have a name for it. We don't even the first 4, at least you're like, okay, well, at least that feels like it's somewhat attached to the tournament. We don't have a temporary 12 or some sort of nickname for this either. They didn't even come up with that. That's how rushed this is. We have no idea. We just know we have 12 teams that have to play their way in. Yeah.
According to the NCAA, it's just the opening round.
That rolls off the tongue. Yeah.
It's really, really, it's catchy. I mean, you got to say this for I didn't like expansion to the first 4 at the time, but at least you could call it the first 4. Yeah. There's something there. And
Dayton
to be fair,
juice,
Yeah, Dayton.
Now I'm nostalgic about the first 4. That's how far I've gone down the rabbit hole at this point.
This is how they get you. Instead of just being strip it all down, we're, former radicals, we're like Bob Ferguson in One Battle After Another. It was just just, take care of yourself out there. We're good now, whatever. But once upon a time, I've been the first 4 is an abomination. Get rid of this disaster, whatever. And to be fair, what changed my mind in large part was Dayton. The Dayton basketball fans just showing up
so good.
Whatever. Yeah. This is awesome. I love college basketball and I'm in. It's all right, fine. You guys can keep the event. We'll keep it going. But actually I wanted to talk to you about that because we talked about it last week. Norlander put out a list of teams that he thought, or not teams, pardon me, cities that he thought were in discussions that he's heard. He's got Albuquerque, Dallas, Fort Worth, Des Moines, shout out Iowa.
Nice.
Denver, Kansas City, Las Vegas, Omaha, Phoenix, Salt Lake City, Wichita. So we talked about Wichita last week. That's a decent one. I feel like it's got to be a kind of a West Coast thing. Because you have to get teams to a West Coast site, probably, if you're going to have them there and you want them to be relatively close. I think Albuquerque makes a lot of sense if you had it at the Pit. That's a good spot. Vegas obviously makes sense. I don't know.
So it'll be 3 sites, right? So it'll be Dayton and then 2 more sites in theory. If there's 12 teams, so 3 sites, 4 teams in each site.
I guess, yeah. I guess so.
So like, I mean, Dayton, Vegas,
And, yeah.
Wichita, like something like that.
Because I guess Dayton is Eastern, right?
Yeah.
Dayton's still Eastern. So you could do Dayton Central Time in Wichita and then Albuquerque, whatever.
Yeah, Kirky would
I'm
be
surprised Sioux Falls is not getting
Oh man, the Pentagon? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I can't believe there's no love for that purpose-built arena that has been hosting college basketball games randomly for like the last 5
They
years.
do a great job of hosting at the Pentagon. I mean, that does feel like somewhere. I mean, maybe it's something with flights or whatever. I know they've had some trouble with like planes and chartering flights or whatever. Yeah, it just feels like Vegas is where they're gonna. I feel like Vegas will be one of those sites. I just, just for the ease of it all, and they'll just be like, okay, this is easy. People like Vegas. Fans will go to Vegas. Boom, we're done. You know what I mean? And then maybe they throw in. I mean, Des Moines would be fun just because Iowa loves. That's the other. You have to find these places that love college basketball, and all those sites that you mentioned are places that do have an affinity for college basketball outside of Las Vegas. I mean, Vegas just it is what it is. It's a show in town. There's plenty of shows in town, but it's easy to get to logistically. But the other sites that you mentioned, all those sites to me all kind of check the box of at least it's a college basketball type of town and place where a casual fan that just lives in Sioux Falls or lives in, Albuquerque or lives in Des Moines or whatever it is, Wichita, they're like, yeah, I'll go to a college basketball game for the NCAA tournament. Sure, why not? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go to tournament games for sure. Yeah, I think Des Moines would show up, honestly.
Oh, for sure.
Like, having gone to many Iowa State tournament games in Des Moines, pretty solid crowds. Like, and not everybody there rooting for a high school. So I feel like there's a potential there.
Just look what Iowa does for the state fair. I think that's like the biggest state fair like in the country. Like they go ham.
They do, quite literally. Yes, they do. The pork is a big deal at the Iowa
Turkey
State
legs everywhere. Yeah, you give
Fair.
them an event, they'll show up. That's right.
Yeah, that's right. We just don't let the politicians get in on it. If the tournament is happening during like primary season, just tell them they're not allowed.
That's always a classic, like going up to Iowa to announce your run for president. At the state fair, everyone gets behind you. You got a nice
look
little
at this
caucus.
crazy food I'm eating. Wow, I'm eating a fried Snickers.
I'm
Great
normal.
job, buddy. Yeah, I'm cool like you. Mitt Romney back in the day was like, I'm having a hot dog at the Iowa State Fair. It's like, Mitt Romney, you've not had a hot dog.
Takes a bite, spits it out as soon as the camera pans down.
Yeah, no, thank you, brother. He's like, what is this absolute trash these heathens are eating? Anyway, that's tournament expansion. I don't like it. And it bummed me out even more when I saw the bracket.
Is there anybody like in our world that has really come out and been a champion of expansion that's other than Seth Davis? Right? There's really nobody.
Well, Ken likes it.
Well,
Ken
that's more traffic for
likes
the
it.
site.
John Gassaway, who I used to work with at ESPN and have followed his work since I was like in college, who I really respect. He's pro. Okay. Like, without completely ignoring the potential downsides or whatever, he has written a couple times, not just in the past few years. He wrote about it last week. I think shortly after we got off the air, he published that was like very pro.
Okay.
Those are the only two.
I like to think sometimes when you're super intellectual, like those guys are very smart people, sometimes it's easier to zag, like Chuck Klosterman, who we have on quite a bit with Bill. Like, even if it's not the right answer, he gives the answer just to like argue that answer. You know what I mean? Where you're just like, this is such a turn of like he was arguing one time with Bill, like Grayson Allen should be the most beloved player in college basketball. And I'm like, you can't believe that, but I do appreciate the argument.
Chuck Klosterman is one of the all-timers of just being like, here's a thought I had, and I'm just going to say it to you. And if it sounds insane to the rest of the world, I don't care. Yeah. And you got to respect it. I don't think that's that. Like, they make reasonable arguments.
I'm sure.
You know what I mean? Like,
they're smart,
it's okay. Yeah. Like, but it's just I can intellectualize it all I want. It will be fine. But again, the primary argument that I've heard for this has always been, it'll be fine. And it's just like, yeah, it will be. It's fine. I'm still going to watch college basketball. I'll still do bubble watch. I'm still going to do the whole thing. I love the sport. It's fine. But doesn't mean I think it's going to be an improvement. And typically when you make a change to something, you
hope for the better. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't go out in the backyard and think, you know what? I'm going to rip up my yard a little bit today.
Just see what happens.
Rip up the grass. Yeah. Just like, screw it. Right. Like, or just, I'm just going to maintain the level. It's like I go out in my backyard. I'm like, okay, I'm going to cut some trenches. I'm going to put some mulch in. I'm going to do blah, blah, blah. In theory, this will be an improvement. Maybe it won't work out well because I'm bad at stuff, but it will. The idea was that it was going to be an improvement. And I don't know that anyone's coming, with a couple of exceptions. I don't know that anyone, at least in power, doing this thinks it's going to be an actual improvement to the current NCAA tournament. And I think that's where we can end the discussion, because I just don't think there's like a really good argument for it, except, hey, Big Ten and SEC, please don't kill us.
Yeah.
Like, we
did what you asked. We honored your becking call, and here you go.
Yeah. Take it easy. Syracuse can get in the tournament next year when they're 3 games under 500. Just give us a break.
6 Big East teams can get in now, right?
Take it easy. Big, like Virginia Tech, you're in. Okay, we got it. Like, we're fine. And Gavitt did tell Norlander, I think, last week, that they expect this to be the format for a very long time. And they don't expect for future expansion before the new TV rights deal comes up. That's a long time away. I think it's 5 more years away. So we'll see how that all goes. But
it was 15 years between the last expansion to this expansion. So if I were to set the line, I would say, if you set the line at 15 or 14 and a half, I would take the under before they.
That's a big under. Yeah. Oh, I'm hammering the under. Mm-hmm. Hammering the under. Which is a sad state of affairs. And honestly, the guy, his name's Alan. I can't remember his last name, and I apologize to Alan for doing that. And I wrote about him and mentioned him last week on the show. He's also pro expansion. He does bracketology for the Marquette blog Cracked Sidewalks, and he's been circulating a proposal that's just go to 80. Mm-hmm. Because if you do 80, you can set it up in X, Y, and Z way, and it's a little bit more logistically consistent. And also you head off the next 5 years of being like, well, we need 80 or we need 80.
Yeah, the next
like push. We expand to 80, then you're done for an extreme amount of time, and people can get used to this is what the tournament is now. So we'll see how that all plays out. But I don't know, man. It kind of bums me out. I'm not gonna lie. It's just like I felt like I was pretty sanguine and zen about it last week, and then I saw the bracket and I was like, this fucking sucks. Like, why are we doing this?
I just didn't like the enthusiasm behind the bracket release. I think that's what really got me. Like they put it out, they were like, see, we did it. It's no problem.
It looks like a normal bracket. Just ignore all these little, where the seeds are going to go. And the responses were not very kind to the NCAA, and I feel bad for the people who work in the press office at the NCAA, because they're nice people, and none of these decisions are down to them. Speaking of which, bad replies on social media posts. The off season of Kentucky continues. Mm-hmm. Tate, what was your response? What were you thinking? What was your first thought when you saw a video of Mark Pope being like, hey, Kentucky fans, what's going on? Let's do some question and answers. And I'll tell you what my response was. It was the, Breaking Bad, Walter White in the back of the truck meme. I was just being like, no, don't do this, dude. What are you doing? What was going through your head when you saw this post?
I knew he had been traveling. I knew Mark Pope had been going to Spain and all different types of places, even domestically, trying to find recruits and everything. So I just thought he had been offline and he had not seen what BB had been up to. And I'm like, oh no, he just logged back in and sent this out. This is not going to go well for him. It was one of those things where you're like, this can't even be real. In the world of AI and all these videos, you're like, is this someone that is a Louisville fan that has created a Mark Pope deep fake video where he's like taking suggestions from Big Blue Nation? But it was real, and he did put it out to the people. And I do have to salute him, because there are two ways to sort of address these types of situations. There's, run into your bunker and act like it isn't happening and stay away from all the pushback and all the commentary, or it's just the head on and face it. And I do feel like this is probably the most direct way you could go after Big Blue Nation. And at the end of the day, I do feel like a lot of people that I know that are Kentucky fans, like they just want to have the conversation and they don't want to feel like you're above it, right? And I do think that Mark Pope, by addressing it, it was a way to endear himself. I mean, we can talk about the responses and everything, but like, yeah, when I first saw it, I was like, Mark Pope, no, this is not. Like the Pope himself does not go out on Twitter and say, hey guys, any thoughts on what's going on in Catholicism these days? You know, hit me with your questions. I'll hit you back. It would not turn out well in that sense either. But Mark Pope, he went head on, and I do have to give him a salute for that.
Yeah. So just about the initial post, the responses were not very kind. No. To be honest, people were not being very kind on the internet. You know, the noted Auburn fan, Pablo Escobarner, said, hey, coach, thanks for doing this. I'm a season ticket holder. They've been in the family for generations. I got married at Rupp Arena, paid the deposit for my daughter to do the same. Having said all that, how does it feel knowing you are inferior to Stephen Pearl? Thanks. This is just the kind of, a lot of this just sort of like, hey, great, thanks for blah, blah, blah. And then just like a super mean comment. And yet, it seems like it's actually gone okay. Mm-hmm. The first wave of responses was super mean, and then Mark Pope put out a couple of videos responding, and some of the questions that he responded to were quite harsh and in detail about Kentucky's, you know, alleged recruiting misses and the failures of the past season or whatever. And I feel like have been generally handled quite well, to the point where you're like, maybe this is good. Like, maybe do more of this. This might not be a bad idea. Maybe Mark Pope just needs to do like a weekly or a 2 times a week, like live Twitch stream where he's just like on talking to Kentucky fans, and they'd be like, you know what? By the end of it, Mark won me back over. Like I'm in, because he's very sincere, and like he's not, again, he didn't approach it from a place of like obfuscation or whatever. He just sort of like, hey, look, this happened and this happened, and you know, we're recruiting guys, but they're also in the draft, and we got to figure this out and blah blah blah. And he's like being pretty straight up about it. And by the end of it, and apparently there's more coming, I'm not sure, but I was kind of like, you know what, this might have actually been a pretty good idea. Like at first I was like, the PR people at Kentucky need to stop. Just let Mark be in a bunker and don't bother him. But after a couple of videos, I'm like, yeah, this actually wasn't a terrible idea. This might work.
Yeah, he mastered the tease as well. Like he did like the first one, and then he did his second one, and then he like the tweet that he put out was tackling the GM topic tomorrow, which is obviously been a real topic of conversation. Then he did address it head on. He's like, look, we don't have a GM directly because I don't think it should be a singular role. We have a team. We have 4 people that it's our management team. I sort of view them all in conjunction, whether it's, compliance, whether it's analytics. Like we all have people that wear different hats, but they together sort of form our GM team. And then someone asked like directly, like who makes the final say on roster decisions? And then he just said point blank, me. Put it on me. I'm making those decisions. Someone asked him about having 20, I think 16 of the top 20 was on campus. He had signed none of them over the past year. And he was like, it's great that we got the 16 on campus, but I would like to sign more than what we did. It was kind of like he had a candor to him, which I thought was really good. And at the end of the day, like with Mark Pope, I think if you don't have him talking, you can create a version of Mark Pope, which I feel like the internet was doing, which is like, he's a little bit strange. Recruits don't want to be around him, all that sort of stuff. But then you see him in these videos, and I've talked to him personally. I mean, he's a very personable guy, very likable guy, very affable guy, a lot of energy, obviously played basketball, understands basketball. And he talked about, hey, we had a recruit on campus for 3 hours. We didn't like what we saw. We ended the visit and he left, and we were okay with that, right? So like that just sort of upfront kind of forward-facing conversation, you kind of come away with it like, hey, we may not get the exact answers that we wanted, but at least he's given us a non-politician type answer. He's given us a direct, real answer of like, this is what we did. This is what we want to do. This is the expectation for what we're looking for. Someone asked him about Malachi Marino. He's like, hey, we're pulling for him. He's got BBN's, respect. And obviously he has my support. I know he wants to go to the NBA. I know he wants to win a national championship. We're going to support him in both those goals. Like he addressed everything pretty much head on. And I would just love to see like the compiling of the tweets. Like, is Mark Pope in the replies picking out what he wants to answer? I do doubt that, but
Can't be.
It's probably good to know the pulse of the nation, though, because Big Blue Nation is very loud and very proud, and I think it's smart for him to do this. And like you said, this is something that maybe even in season he can do, depending on how things are going. He can maybe put out some fires, because the less you talk, the more the Big Blue Nation speaks for you, and that's not good. And that's what Calipari did not do a good job at, right? Calipari kind of acted above it. You had KSR turn on him, right? And like some of those power players down there created a version of Calipari that I don't think he liked, and then he tried to like almost stiff arm these people. I think Mark Pope is trying to make sure he stays engaged in the conversation, and I think that's really smart.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Cal was in the early days he ran that like a dictatorship.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was just like, get on board, or maybe you won't even be credentialed. Like, I don't care. You know what I mean? And at the time they were so good that kind of happened.
And you had to placate him a little bit because you wanted to stay credentialed. Yeah.
100%. And you just, you know, if you wanted to be in the mix for stories down there, you kind of had to get in whatever. And that mellowed over time. And especially as they got worse, then it started to turn, right? And the people who, you know, I don't know if KSR fits this bill exactly, but there were probably people who were kind of shoved aside early on who, when it started to go bad, were, you know, not super happy about it. And kind of, you know, like he did a fine job, but like relative to the standards he set in his first, 6-7 years, you can understand why Kentucky fans were like, hey, like we're not good anymore and our offense sucks and we're just not like fun to watch. And, you know, you've got Nate Oates over here running like NBA stuff and we're just getting circles running around us. Like all that stuff was baked in. And I just feel like if you're Mark Pope, like Mark Pope's not that guy. Like, and I don't mean that in the, like, you're not that guy, pal. Like, I don't mean that in a bad way. You know what I mean? I just mean like he's a different person. And this is maybe a better approach. And you know, we don't have to spend a ton of time analyzing the media approaches of college basketball coaches. But the reason why it's interesting is because their roster has been such a topic of conversation this offseason. Like we've talked about it multiple times. And I really like have tried to branch out and like not just talk about Kentucky's roster on this podcast very often, but like, you know, they just got Frank Kapnong from was he at Oregon last year? Where was Kapnong last year? I don't know.
I think he was at Washington.
He was at Washington.
He originally went to Oregon when he was coming out.
He was at Oregon. Yeah. As like, you know, your quote unquote classic depth signing adds great depth for Mark Pope and the Wildcats.
Another depth piece. We love those.
Yeah, the depth piece, big depth piece. And, you know, now they're like in a kind of a holding pattern with Moreno, which is fascinating because there's lots of guys like this in the draft. Moreno is kind of almost the poster boy of like, if he doesn't come back, this team's roster is in bad shape. Right. Mm-hmm. And they're, you know, Kentucky thinks they're in on Milan Momcilovic. That's a big potential situation there as well. But there's a lot of guys like that. And Moreno is kind of, he's not the best prospect among them, but he's the one that like, if this guy decides to stay in the draft, despite being kind of like low first round, whatever, he apparently decided not to play 5-on-5s at the combine this week.
Met with the Knicks. Yeah.
So there's maybe a, you know, if I'm a Kentucky fan, I'm thinking, I don't love the sound of that. That doesn't sound great if you're just reading the tea leaves. So that's where it gets dicey again, is because if you get Moreno back, and I think Moreno's fine. I don't think he's like an amazing player. He's clearly a good NBA prospect, and maybe as a sophomore would be a really nice player. But he didn't like, make Kentucky sing or anything this year, but he's definitely a guy you want to get back. And if he doesn't come back, then you're in scramble mode again. So it's just it's the whole offseason has been a crazy and fascinating situation around Kentucky because we saw how they built their roster last year. It didn't work out. A lot of people thought it wouldn't work out, and there's a lot of pressure on this year.
Yeah, there was like sort of a manifest to the whole situation where, people were like, this is a lot of money to spend for this roster in particular, especially with the biggest name was a question mark and coming off an ACL tear, which I think was the real miscalculation. And you talked about Jalen Lowe and sort of the fit there. I mean, that stuff was all fair game at that point to have that conversation. But I mean, if you get in a situation where Moreno comes back, you have a surefire anchor there at the 5, you're able to get a Momcilovic, or maybe you get a Tunde Yesufu, who also is kind of deciding to stay or go, and he decides to go to Kentucky. All of a sudden you're like, hey, this is a fun team. They've been able to put together a nice roster. Cam Williams, he'll be a nice player at the 3 for them. And he talked about Cam Williams during one of his, back and forth with the fans. And he said he's very excited about what he can do as a starter. So again, it changes on a dime very quickly. They still need a lot of things to fall into the right place, but I think that he has put out some of the fires that were burning. Like there weren't just embers. There were pure fires that were happening. Like you just won the national championship, right? This is, I guess they were not those kind of good fires. They were bad fires, and he put out a few of them. And I think that's encouraging for Mark Pope. And maybe this is a sign that being upfront and having some candor can go a long way. And I think it has in this situation. Now, it doesn't solve all the issues, but I think at least address some of those issues. And I think it was smart at the end of the day, because you and I did not feel that way when we first saw the tweet. So good on Mark Pope.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, people just want to hear from you. It's why these guys do coaches shows. They get a little bit of money for the program with the sponsors or whatever. But bottom line is that this was an idea pioneered like 50 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, do a coach's radio show and talk to people about the team. And it used to just be, you could only hear it locally. Now it's obviously, you can hear it in Beijing if you want to. Yeah,
Calipari did the Cowcast. That was like, he was like, I'm doing a podcast because Kentucky's brand is national. I need everybody to hear my thoughts. And you're like, okay, perfect.
I mean, I remember when Rick Pitino was doing a blog.
Yeah.
Like for when he was at Louisville, he was doing like a blog once a week, and it was hilarious, and it was just like, oh, look at this, Rick Pitino's blogging. And he surely typed it out like on his BlackBerry and sent it to the PR, to Kenny Klein or whatever. But like, anyway, it's better than nothing. And it's probably better, especially when you're in a vacuum of like, oh my God, our program is dying. You better like, it's a good idea to get out there and talk about it. Speaking of Malachi Moreno, I'm seeing right now, he measured at 6'11" and a quarter barefoot, 242.8 pounds with a 7.5-inch wingspan and 9.3.5 standing reach. Tate, you want to comment on those numbers? Is that an NBA draft pick? Like I'm in measurement zone right now. I've been looking at all the measurements, and I actually did a story about this at The Athletic a few years back, where I made a huge spreadsheet of what guys were in college versus their NBA combine measurements. And then went and talked to the coaches about the guys who were most inflated. And TJ Otzelberger is one of them, but it was under Hoiberg. He was an assistant at Iowa State at the time, but Iowa State consistently had the most inflated, this guy's 6'8". He's really like 6'5.5" or whatever when he got to the NBA combine. But I'm always fascinated by these measurements because all of a sudden you get like extremely definitive responses from people of like, oh, he's too small. Oh, that wingspan, it's not going to work. Like, it's just so funny to me. Like beyond the like, oh yeah, this guy was listed at X in college and now this is how tall he actually is. Just like you get these NBA guys who are just like, oh, Keaton Wagler's wingspan, it's too short. That's not going to work. Like blah, blah, blah. Like, fade this guy. and it cracks me up every time.
Yeah, I do feel like Amari Allen is the one, and Kingston Fleming seem like the two that I've seen so far where everyone's like, oh my God, Kingston Fleming's his wingspan. He's not going to be a lottery pick with that wingspan. And a lot of people start, getting up in arms about it. No pun intended. I think Amari Allen is listed at 6'8" at Alabama. He measured in without, again, they measure these guys without shoes. Not that the shoes are going to be 3 inches, but Amari Allen is 6'8" on Alabama's website. He measured in at 6'5.5", which is an example of what you're talking about. I think to me, the most recent one was Bronny James and Isaiah Collier at USC. And I think Bronny was listed at 6'4", and Collier was listed at 6'5". And then when they did the measurements, Collier was like 6'2.5", and Bronny was like 6'2" flat. But Collier wanted to make sure he was taller than Bronny James, so they did the inflated inches to make sure that everybody was appeased there. But yeah, there's always a lot of overreactions. To me, the big one is the weight. A lot of people, I saw people freaking out about Caleb Wilson being 210 pounds. There's a lot of people that were excited about Darren Peterson being 200 pounds. Look, weight's probably the easiest thing to deal with. Wingspan, I think, is very fair. I think hand size, to me, is always the big one. I like trying to see what these guys' hands are, and obviously we don't have that measurement at the college level. But there is a lot of rigging that happens with these guys and what they're supposed to be listed at. And even like, you wouldn't think that Cam Boozer is an inch shorter than Caleb Wilson, right? If you watch him on a basketball court. But you look at the measurements without shoes and he is. And maybe some of that stuff stands out to you at some level, but for the most part, I enjoy the overreactions too. And I think weight's the biggest one. A lot of people freak out over weight, but we've seen guys that, even, when they get into the league, Giannis, what he was like 215 soaking wet, and now he's, 260 or whatever it is. Like that stuff seems to especially when you're dealing with 18, 19-year-old kids, like there's a lot of growth and a lot of maturation that just happens naturally, and a lot of weight that's put on just in the league with strength and conditioning. But you're right. There's a lot of overreactions that happen. And I've had a lot of people sending me like, can you believe that he's this and that? And I'm like, yeah, it's not that far off. You know what I mean? Like an inch here, it's okay. I feel like Braden Smith, people are going after Braden Smith for what he measured in at, but we've seen guys that have been able to find a way to make it work at the next level. Tyler Tanner, another guy at Vanderbilt. A lot of people shocked that he's 5'10" and 3/4 or whatever it was, which will be interesting to see what his decision is. But yeah, for those guards especially, it's like if you're like on the good side of it, Acuff measured in at 6'2" without shoes, and everyone's like, "Oh, he's surefire now." Like he's locked in now that he's 6'2". It's like, okay, I get it. That works.
I got to be honest. There was never a point last year where I was watching Kingston Flemings and being like, "Does this guy really have the wingspan?" Like, you know what I mean? Like,
with all the deflections that he had and everything, I'm like, he makes up for it. You know what I mean? And that's some of that stuff. It's like the basketball of it all will play itself out.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I get it. Like you're making significant monetary decisions on these guys, and you want to have every
millions of dollars
available. Right. 100% get it. And, there are templates for the kinds of players who make sense in the NBA. Because everybody's big now, everybody's long, everybody can move, and like watch a quarter of the NBA playoffs, watch any NBA throughout the year, except the teams that are tanking when they're playing like, G League guys to get draft picks. But like watch a competitive NBA, watch the Spurs and like the Timberwolves. Everybody is big. And if you're not big, you're usually like a 15-year NBA veteran that everybody likes having around because you've had a long career and you make good plays. You know what I mean? You're Mike Conley getting 10 minutes or whatever. You know what I mean? Like you're like, so I get it. But the obsession about the stats is interesting because it kind of maybe potentially, as I've been watching like Jonathan Givney post, official measurements of NBA, and like Tyler Tanner was the first one where I was like, I don't care about this, but also maybe this is where you come back to school. You know what I'm saying? Because like 5'10", wingspan 6'4", standing reach 7'9", like there's a lot of money waiting for you if you go back to Vanderbilt. That might be a decent idea. I also saw a funny one with Koa Pete because he came in at, let me find it real quick. 6'7", 245, wingspan 6'11", standing reach 8'8". And I saw someone quote tweet that and just be like, the NFL is missing on a generational edge rusher. Why is this guy not playing professional football at 6'7", 245, which I kind of get.
A great tight end too. Yeah, either one, whatever he wanted to do.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Honestly, probably a tight end given his hands. Like, he's got great hands.
Yeah. Antonio Gates 2.0 right there.
If he was a little worse at basketball, he'd be the guy who gets drafted by an NFL team and would have like a 15-year NFL career. But anyway, I wanted to, so we've got the NBA draft lottery, right? And this always fascinates me this time of year. It's not strictly college basketball, but it's kind of college basketball because we watch these guys all year and then we have to say farewell and they go into the draft process. And there's lots of guys who will maybe still come back. And maybe we'll talk about them on next week's show because we don't want to go on forever tonight. But
we'll also have some answers after the combine. You know what I mean? Once these guys play in scrimmages and decisions will be made.
100%. And we talked about Moreno earlier. There's like a lot of guys like that. Actually, Isaac Trotter did a great piece for CBS talking about guys with decisions to make. And like, there's a few in there that I think are probably basically gone, but the draft changes quickly. And if a guy thinks he's like, Henry Vasar for UNC, like, oh, I'm going to be a first round pick. Maybe it becomes clear to him that's not going to happen. And his agent is like, hey man, you could go make a bunch of money if you want to go back to college basketball. Like those are still options for a lot of these guys. And that's probably a discussion for next week on the show. But in the meantime, the draft lottery happened and it's just kind of interesting because we've talked about the best players in college basketball for months and months and about their NBA comps. And I remember I did my whole thing about how, I was like confused by Boozer and then I got it all of a sudden. Like I was just like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter. Obviously the Wizards won the lottery, big deal for my local township here. And Utah was number 2, Memphis number 3, my Chicago Bulls number 4, Clippers, Brooklyn, Sacramento, Atlanta, Dallas, Milwaukee, Golden State, Oklahoma City, Miami, Charlotte 14. So I was wondering what you were thinking when you saw the lottery and you're thinking about, AJ DeMonsa, Darren Peterson, Caleb Boozer, Cam
Boozer, Caleb Wilson, right?
Cam Boozer. yeah, Cam Boozer. Caleb
That'd be
Wilson.
a great player. If it was Caleb Boozer, he'd be incredible. He'd be the number one pick.
Combine them. Yeah, if you combine them. And down the line here, right? Like, because again, this is all very abstract when we're talking about in the college season. Like, oh, is this guy the best pro? Blah, blah, blah. Darren Peterson. We talked about him forever. What were your thoughts when you saw the lottery and like how this is going to play out?
Yeah, I mean, it was a big win for Washington, like you said. It was also cool that John Wall was there. Obviously, the last number 1 pick that they had in 2010. I thought that, Bill was saying on the show with me that he thought it was a bad omen that John Wall was there. I thought it was actually pretty cool that, like, the guy who was the number 1 pick, who was supposed to be a franchise shifter there, and obviously was a 5-time All-Star, did have a nice career, just had some unfortunate injuries and just some bad breaks in general playing in an East with LeBron James and, some of those teams that he had to go up against. But again, for him to be the one that was there, I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah, that's right.
The Derrick Rose Bulls.
Derrick Rose Bulls for sure in the mix there. But yeah, the Wizards getting that, I thought that was a great story. I do think it's funny because, like, it does feel like AJ has kind of been locked in at number 1. And then I talked to some people and, they were just like, hey, not so fast. I wouldn't be shocked if the Wizards talk themselves into a situation where they might turn into a Darren Peterson fan club, because Darren Peterson is one of those guys that, we all know how talented he is. And, even in December when I was being asked about it, I was like, I think Peterson's number 1 and I think AJ's number 2. And that completely shifted in about, into January, February. Even though when they went head-to-head, Peterson was incredible for a half, and then he sat out the second half, which lended itself to more of a conversation that you and I had on the show quite a bit. But Utah loves AJ. I thought AJ's response to Washington getting number 1 was pretty funny. But if there's a world in which where Washington feels better about Peterson, they work him out and they say, hey, this is a transcendent guard. We can play at the 2 next to Trae Young. We already have Sarr. We already have Anthony Davis. Maybe Peterson's our guy. And maybe we can trade back to 2 with the Jazz, who obviously love AJ. And everybody wins. We get our guy at number 2. We also get some more assets, and we make a big move there. And it's a win-win. But if I'm the Wizards, I have the number 1 pick. I take that pick. I don't play any games with that. But they'll get calls. I think that's fascinating. I think Memphis at 3, to me, is really the crux of what's going to happen, moving down the draft, because Caleb versus Boozer, that is flash versus function. And I think just that conversation that will be had in that building will be so fascinating, because, I mean, you could understand why Caleb Wilson would be so tantalizing. You could also understand why Cam Boozer is just like one at every level, is a total grown-up, kind of stabilizes that operation, fits well with Cedric Howard. They were supposed to be teammates anyway at Duke last year, so that could be a really good 1-2 combo. The Bulls are just going to kind of sit there and take whoever's available, whether it's Boozer, whether it's Caleb Wilson. For them, it's a win. I think the Clippers is fascinating because they seem to like Wagler a lot. There's been some pushback on the measurements of Wagler. Doesn't make sense. It seems like LA really likes him. I think Acuff is also going to be in that conversation at 5, but Acuff at 6, 7. The Kings love Acuff. I think that would be a nice gift for them, despite them being very upset about them getting the number 7 pick. They might end up with a great player and Darius Acuff. And then you got like Mikel Brown Jr., you got Kingston Flemings, you got Braden Burries. That cluster of guards, I think, is just really fascinating. And I know Dallas really likes Mikel Brown Jr., and I think based on his measurements, he's a lot bigger than people seem to think. I've seen some people kind of compare him to different guards, but he's measured in 6'3" and above without shoes on. So, I mean, he plays with shoes. He's 6'4". I think he's a really solid player. The Bucks at 10, they always do something weird. They always kind of take a big swing. We've seen them do it before with Thon Maker back in the day, where they were just like, wait a second, they're taking Thon Maker number 10. I wouldn't be shocked if they took a guy like Nate Mint there. Yaxel Lindeborg, who we saw play at such a high level, he's going to be fascinating to see where he slots in, whether it's going to be as high as 6, 7 range, or he ends up going to a team like the Golden State Warriors or Oklahoma City Thunder. And then I think a Dai Mara. I haven't seen enough people talk about a Dai Mara as a guy who ends up going in that 5 to 10 range. And I've seen him more like slotted into like 11 to 15 range. And I think Mara is a guy where teams are just like, hey, we need a center. Even the Clippers, like maybe they trade back and take Mara and get some assets to kind of, figure out that 5 slot for them. So there's a lot of college players that are going to be in that conversation in the lottery. And I think if you just look at the lottery, there's only one guy, Karim Lopez, who has seemingly not been a college basketball guy that's in the conversation, but everybody else in the top 14 is a college basketball player that we know and we love. And I think that's really good for the sport. And I think it's really cool to see kind of the matchmaking that happens. I suspect there will be trades. I'll be interested to see what Utah does, but if they end up with Darren Peterson at number 2, or they take Cam Boozer, because Carlos Boozer is a scout for the Jazz. I mean, if they take, Cam Boozer number 2, that throws a wrench into everything as well. Where maybe Memphis, at that point is like, do we just take Darren Peterson and we get John Moran insurance? So there's just a lot.
Would it make sense for Utah? Would it make sense for Utah to take Boozer though? Aren't they kind of set at those positions, or am I?
Yeah, I mean, their front court is Markin and Jaren Jackson, and then they'll probably re-sign Walker Kessler. But let's say they're like, hey, we're going to cut ties with Kessler. We see Boozer as like a small ball 5 type situation. We think he's a bigger physical piece we can put next to Jaren Jackson. We're already big enough with Jackson and Markin. Maybe we make that play. I don't know. But Again, all these conversations are going to be a lot of fun because I'm excited to see what they look like at the next level. And if you told me there were 4 or 5 Hall of Famers in this class, I don't think that's a stretch. But again, this is not an exact science and nobody knows anything. That's my favorite part about the draft. There's a lot of people in NFL is the same thing. It's like everyone is an expert until we, kind of see what plays out. You know what I mean? Like this is the best draft ever until we're 5 years down the road and everyone's like, oh, these guys stunk. It changes quickly. But I really do like this class and I like, kind of the draw for everybody. Feel bad for the Pacers.
I mean, we were saying it all college basketball season. Like we had, and like beyond the sort of trends of talent filtering upwards and the game getting older and more efficient and faster and everybody's playing better basketball, we also injected this freshman class of like really good players. And it's interesting to kind of figure out where they work or don't work or where they're going to get drafted. I mean, it's just funny to me, the Bulls, as a Bulls fan, going back to my childhood when Michael Jordan was the greatest human being on the planet. When I was 7, I was 6 in 1991. So, you can understand my feeling towards the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan, but like the Bulls, who have been just an atrocious franchise for years now, don't care about winning, really just want to stay under the cap and try to sell tickets and whatever. They're going to have one of, it's not going to be DeBonsa, Peterson probably, but they're likely to have one of Boozer or Wilson, which is just hilarious. Like, talk about just lucking into a great setup, whichever one of those guys they get. And Wilson, as you said on Bill Simmons' podcast, is like the high ceiling guy potentially. But if you get Boozer at 4 in this draft, you're like, great, okay, fantastic. There are people out there making the case for him to be number 1 based on his productivity and his efficiency and all of the things we saw that made him the best player in college basketball this past season. Like, in that top 4, there's really no way to go wrong. And then from 5 and beyond, it gets much more interesting. But the top 4 is like, there really are no bad players there. And if Caleb Wilson gets a 22-foot shot that reliably goes down, which given his mechanics and the way he played at UNC, I feel like he probably will, he's going to be a great player too.
Yeah, I think all 4 of those guys would go number 1 in the 2024 draft. So I think if you're one of those 4 teams, you're like, we basically got a number 1 pick in a year where we did not get the number 1 pick. Obviously, Washington got the number 1 pick, but like if it was Ricochet and Alex Sarr, I think Boozer goes before both those guys. I think Wilson goes before those guys. I think Peterson goes before those guys, and I think AJ goes before those guys. Right? I mean, so it's a win in that sense.
Well, I thought you were going to do the Jamal Mashburn. 6 guys would be drafted ahead of Cooper Flag.
No, I can't do that. I call it the Ricochet test. You know what I mean? I think those 4 guys all go before Ricochet, which is no knock. I think he's a good player. He's a solid player, but I think all 4 of those guys.
Are we sure about that?
He's solid. I think he's a role player. A solid role player. Once he figures that out. I mean, it's also tough when you have like Jalen right next to you, who's basically the same size as you and just way better. It makes you look worse. It's like the opposite of what happened with Brown and Tatum. It's like they didn't match well, like it just didn't work.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to get into this more as things progress. The draft is a little ways off, and we have like the thing for college basketball now is because of the way the dates work and because of the money in college basketball, we have big decisions that will affect teams' rosters coming up. And I was going to, full disclosure, talking to Tate before the show, we were going to go through a list of those guys who have decisions to make. I think we can wait on that until next week, and we may have some decisions or we may have some speculation to talk about. But there's a lot of roster pieces that will be filled, as we alluded to with the Kentucky conversation, of like guys coming out of the draft and deciding to stay in college hoops another year. And that will have a huge impact on the way, when in October, November, your top 25 looks when we're getting a read on the sport. So I think we can call it there. Yeah. Unless you got anything else you want to get off your chest. Caleb Wilson, number 1.
I wouldn't take number 1. I was saying that to Bill. I'm just like, I think he's almost better being slighted, like I think him going number 4 behind those 3 guys is probably the best thing that happens to his career. Like there's a little bit of a Marvin Williams situation where like if Utah just, Austin Ainge and Danny Ainge get together and, the owner of the Jazz is like, let's just take Caleb number 2. I feel like that puts a lot of pressure on him. But if he goes 3, 4, he has like a chip on his shoulder. And I think that's the best version. That's what happened this year in college basketball. Like he was kind of disrespected the McDonald's game. Then when he went ahead, head to head with those guys, he played at a very high level because he kind of took it personally. I think that's the best version of Caleb Wilson. And I hope that's how this sort of plays out. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of intel. The interviews will do a lot at the combine. And I think we'll know a lot more when we talk next Monday. And we'll kind of have an idea of who's who and what's what at that point.
When he gets drafted number 4 by the Bulls, I'm going to send him that Michael Irvin clip of like, nobody believes in you.
That's right.
Nobody respects you. And
Mm-hmm.
hopefully that will inspire him to get in the lab with Tim Grover, whoever Tim Grover's underling is these days. I don't know if Tim Grover's still in the game or what.
A lot of like he did so many things that were similar. Like even, I talked to Larry Brown. He was like, man, he just reminds me of Michael so much when he was at Carolina his freshman year. So for him to like go to the Bulls and then be able to kind of do a revamped version of that would be a whole lot of fun.
Yes, this is what I love to hear. All right, we'll have a lot more on this and many other college basketball topics, but I like the draft, and we're going to talk about the draft on this show a bit because it is a transition from college hoops to the NBA and the sort of confluence of the two, and it's interesting to me. I write about it every year on my newsletter. I do a draft recap every year talking about kind of a college basketball fan's perspective on these guys and where they go, and I find the whole thing very fascinating because of the difference in the games and the similarities too, and how guys relate and how they don't. So interesting to continue to track. That's going to be our show for this week. Thank you again to Tate for coming on. He's the man. Go check out all of his stuff, including Ringer Tailgate over at the Ringer. He was on Bill Simmons' show earlier on Monday, which was really fun. Vernon jumped on there later, which was hilarious as well. I love Vernon. And thank you to our producer, Corey Aldis. Thank you to Trilly Donovan for making this whole thing go. We will talk to you next week. Until then, bye-bye.